All right, we're gonna,
Got it.
okay,
Got it.
so we find that these wise here in verse 3 shine as the firmament, and they're considered wise. They seem to teach and to warn in some regard. We also have discovered that Michael, even Jesus did at the time of the end of the first covenant, stands on behalf of Israel. Deb, you had made mention of, well, who stands on behalf of spiritual Israel at their, last, I don't want to say last 3.5 years, or their time of difficulty, who would stand for them on behalf of them?
Who stands on behalf of spiritual Israel?
Right.
Jesus.
Jesus does.
Yeah.
But is it possible, being it's just descriptive of these people that are wise, that reflect his appearance, that those that will stand, I'm not suggesting Jesus doesn't physically come, but maybe that Jesus in us or in his people are the ones that arise or stand at the end of the second covenant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very possible.
Yeah, because there's this group we just read about in Daniel verse 3. So let's jump back to Revelation, because Revelation's full of these metaphors. And God, I feel like once you begin to understand the question, and here's the question: is it possible that Jesus in us, or Jesus in his people, at or during the time of the last 3.5 years, that's a metaphor, the last 3.5 years would be that last period of time after, they crucified their Lord in the second covenant. My guess is it represent the death of the church, and the period of time before at the end of what is referred to as the 3.5 years, who stands there? So let's read this verse in Revelation.
What's the chapter?
That would help. 6:17.
I can read it. For the great day of their wrath is come, and who is able to stand?
Are you with me? Do you
Yeah,
see, this is like, I feel like this is, God presents this as a riddle. If you understand what he means, who is able to stand? Well, only people that would be able to stand would be who? The wise, right? Those that are reflecting what they're discovering. Oh my gosh, they're the ones that are able to stand. Everybody else would be like verse 15 and 16. Somebody read that.
yeah. Go ahead, Gus.
And the kings of the earth, and the princes, and the chief captains, and the rich, and the strong, and every bondman and free man, hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains. And they say to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb.
By the way, to stand, to set, establish, et cetera, God's having God's got a sense of humor if you understand what he's saying, but this is definitely one of those tongue-in-cheek riddles. Like, yeah, nobody's going to be able to stand without my son. Nobody will, but there will be those that do stand on my behalf. Now, here's another verse.
Wait, can I say this?
Yeah.
The international, wait, what's it called? The New International Version says, for the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it? Who can withstand the wrath? Not who can stand. Just saying.
Oh, that's okay, Dee. I mean, every interpretation of the Bible is dependent on what they view as the context. That's all.
Right.
So you read other verses and they'll say who's able to stand. It's a tongue-in-cheek thing. If you're not realizing God is saying, who will be able to stand? Really, nobody without my son. Nobody.
Right, right.
So yeah, I agree.
They won't be able to withstand it, so it's moot, right?
Nobody will be able to stand because the coming of Jesus is like the fuller's soap in the fire from Malachi. And until that happens, you know, like, well, I forgot what I was going to say with that, but nobody's going to be able to stand. But the point is, the only ones that will be able to stand will be those people in Daniel 12:3 that are the wise. There's something about them, they're reflective of the heavens. So let's turn to Revelation 11:11. This is interesting when you get the meaning of the metaphor here.
But after the 3.5 days, the breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet, and terror struck those who saw them.
This is
Are these the witnesses?
these are the witnesses that we've always been, you know, trained to think these are physical people that stand in Israel. But let's break this verse down. It says after 3.5 days. So what happened after the 3.5 days after Stephen was stoned? The gospel began to be poured out to the whole world, but there was it went out and it got strong from the persecution. But this verse is talking about the second covenant, 3.5 days. So this would be our time. So there's what I think to be a metaphor here of who's the three witnesses, or the two witnesses would be the two witnesses, I believe, is in essence the riddle of this is what my son did, and the witnesses come forth and they do this and they do that, and these miracles occurred, but at some point they're killed. With the power of the church, the light's gone out. Okay. And it talks about their bodies are lying in the street of the great city. That would be what city did we say the great city was?
Zion?
No.
Son, it
Jerusalem?
says
Close.
Philadelphia?
No.
New York,
Babylon.
Babylon.
So,
See, we
so
needed Donna here. She would have said that. Donna would have said Babylon, or Megan, she probably would have said Babylon.
yeah, I think I've said this 1,000 times to Gus.
You have, we would have remembered if we weren't focused on Philadelphia.
So think of the parable here, the two witnesses, so the ministry of Christ that he came to establish, eventually by Babylon, is watered down till it's all but dead. Okay, now that's not to suggest, just like in Jesus's time, there weren't the Annas and the Simeons that were waiting for the birth of the child, because they were such devout people that they recognized it. Here in this passage, you find that there are these witnesses that have been killed in Babylon, because that's what Babylon does. They hijack it, they take things over, and the true spirit of Christ is killed. So after the 3.5 days, which is a metaphor to back in Daniel's 3.5 days, which is a metaphor also for Stephen and him signifying the end of the 3.5 days of the first covenant, Jesus stands. Michael stands. Here in this passage, the breath of life from God enters these two witnesses after our 3.5 days, and these people stand. These are the wise from Daniel 3.
Why
Okay.
are there two? Why do you think it says two?
I don't know. Not really
That's
sure.
not helpful. That's not helpful.
I could guess, but I'm probably wrong.
Because he's
It's
very definite about a number, and I'm like, two witnesses.
So again, don't read this literally. This is a metaphor for the Second Testament people. So
Mhm.
the 3.5 years represents the end of the second covenant when Michael Jesus returns. Okay, well, where does he?
Michael Jesus, is that what you just said?
Michael / Jesus, because it's the
Or Jesus
metaphor.
Michael,
And
not
it's,
to be confused with George Michael.
oh, God. So this is when Jesus arises in his people, just like in Daniel. So let's go back. And by the way, just to make sense, right?
Yeah.
God's, and here's an interesting thing. I went and visited Mom today and we were talking about why did the angels make it so difficult for Daniel to understand this? In other words, why did he give him a dream? And then when Daniel asks the angel, or the angel shows up to tell him, he gives him another dream or another bunch of symbols to describe the first group of symbols that were, it seemed like it muddied the water even more. Why did he?
It certainly did. And then told him to seal it up. Don't tell anybody, seal it up.
Yeah, like, is that because God puts it there, but he hides it? And does God need to hide it from the spiritual authorities too? The spiritual powers who are doing
know.
everything they can to sabotage what plan he has? I don't know.
Maybe.
So let's go back to,
Maybe he puts it out there like that so they'll follow his plan. But that's exactly what he wants them to do. So whatever he wants to happen will happen.
it's like he leads them by the nose and they don't even realize that they're being led.
Right.
But he gives
Right.
out, he doesn't give a precise plan. This is followed by this. He skips and he deviates and he gives little pieces here and little pieces there. And that's not to say we understand Daniel, but I think there is the two sections of time that he specified that involve Jesus at the end. One involves physical Jesus appearing, and the other one probably involves him filling his two witnesses that are lying dead in Babylon and scaring everybody who's still alive in the world, because they begin to do great wonders like Jesus did. But this would be worldwide instead of just.
It says that they tormented those who live on the earth. It says that those two witnesses tormented the people who live on the earth. Yes.
I'm sure they did. I think there's always been anger towards the work God is doing.
Is that before they came? Before they died?
No, it says the inhabitants of the over them being dead and will celebrate by sending each other gifts because these two prophets had tormented those who are on the earth
Before they died, but then
after
when
they died. It's after the the
No,
bad guy.
they celebrated because they were tormented by whatever the prophets were saying to them.
Right. They said that they were celebrating because they didn't have to listen to it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Well, who are those that dwell on the earth in verse 10 or 11? No,
Yeah, 10.
10. Who are those that? So you have to understand in Revelation 11, God's not speaking to he's speaking to his church, which he's subdivided into those that dwell on the earth and those that dwell in heaven. And so when he says those that torment those that dwell on the earth, he's talking about a small portion of his spiritually set apart people that don't make it easy for the earth dwellers that are supposed to be in God's family, that don't make it easy for them. Does that make sense? He's not,
No,
he's
that
not,
doesn't make sense to me. Say it again.
God's word is to his, I believe Revelation in particular, it's a hidden book, but it's God's word to his people, which he knows a portion of them are lukewarm.
Okay,
Another portion of them aren't. And he'd say, well, I'd rather have you be cold than lukewarm because you think you're comfortable. Jesus was hot. And that's why Jesus would spew out of his mouth those that would be earth dwellers or the lukewarmers. And so the message here is not to the wayward of the earth, it's to those that are within his church that have,
on the earth,
yeah,
on the earth.
yeah, the earth dwellers that are on earth in his, what's supposed to be his body, and he does spew them out eventually. So
And it's not just a small portion, it's the majority of the people,
by far,
fortunately.
right, by far. So
That's scary. P.S.
let's
Go
go,
ahead.
let's go back to Daniel 12 and we'll blow through the rest of the chapter. I think we left off with 4 or 3.
Yeah,
You gonna read?
okay. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the many will go here and there to increase knowledge.
What do you think that means?
I don't know. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Knowledge shall be increased? Huh.
Well, they're the book's sealed, and it is sealed. The Bible's very much sealed. I think what seems to suggest as we get close to the end, it begins to make sense a little by little.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I also think that Jesus is coming is not a one-time like quick thing. I think it's a slow progressive opening of the light that begins to dawn, and it seems to increase on some of his people that are wise, that are recognizing the light through the eastern window of the, the temple, his temple. Most of his people aren't paying attention to the light in his temple.
Right.
They're not seeing it. So he does open this at some point. I think probably he already has, but I think his coming could last a long time. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Somebody want to read 5 through 7?
Gussie, you wanna read?
And I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other 2, the one on the brink of the river on this side, and the other on the brink of the river on that side. And one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? What's
7. Awesome.
And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and a half. And when they have made an end of the breaking in pieces the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished.
Again, a lot said there. So who are the 2 beings on the sides of the riverbanks?
I don't know. Are they angels?
I would think they're probably angels. And who would be the man clothed in linen who's over the river?
Is that Jesus?
Yeah. So Jesus, assuming it is Jesus, says, this shall be for the 3.5-year period when the power of the holy people are broken in pieces. Then all these things shall be finished. So what does that mean? Because there's been a tremendous amount that's been said up to this point, and supposedly from 5 onward, it's another vision. So 4 ended the previous vision that Daniel had heard from the angel partway through 10 and all of chapter 11, and then up through verse 4. So suddenly, go ahead, Dave.
So, I was just gonna ask, who are the holy people who have been finally broken? Is that the?
I tell you what, I think.
That the ones that are scattered through the earth?
I think in the first covenant, again, he makes mention of the 3.5 years here, the 3.5 year period,
Yeah,
is the period of time that God breaks what he once considered holy, that was the Jews. Right? And
Right.
Jesus comes and the power of his holy people are broken. But in the second covenant, it's the same thing. Jesus comes and the power of his spiritual people are broken. And this represents what the original 2300 days, remember way back when Daniel saw the vision of I think it was the call zone. He sees, the angel tells him there's something about 2300 evenings and mornings, and then the temple shall be cleaned or cleansed. Do you remember that? And
Yeah.
so here seems to be Jesus is telling him this 3.5 year period, the power of my people are broken, and then things will be cleansed. So he seemed to have done that in the first Old Testament people, but he follows the same process, and it's referenced by using the 3.5 year metaphor in the second people who go through a similar process, but on a spiritual level. Their power is broken, but that doesn't mean that God doesn't work and begin to fill out his presence in, like when he restores the life of the 2 witnesses, for instance. He
Right.
takes them, they're dead in the city of Babylon, and they're laying there, there's nothing left of them. But he restores them because he had to clean the sanctuary first. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
It's the same process. One's a natural process, the other spiritual. So that represents the cleaning of the temple, which is what Jesus came to do, where it's referenced kind of haphazardly all through, his gospels. He'll throw out these little things, how he came to clean the temple, and he refers to these people that are buying and selling, and he overturns the table. That's what Jesus does at the end. He comes and he overturns his temple because it's not clean. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Somebody read 11 through 11, 8 through 11.
I'll read.
That's a good idea.
I heard, but I did not understand. So I asked, my Lord, what will the outcome of all this be? He replied, go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified, made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days, and blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days.
Go ahead.
Read on.
Yeah, just finish the last verse.
As for you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance.
So he asked for wisdom, Daniel does in verse 8. And in essence, I guess it's Jesus who's speaking here. And he just basically tells them, look, what's going to happen is going to happen. It'll be sealed at the end. And Daniel's probably seems to have an understanding a couple chapters back of what like the marrow was, which seemed to be Jesus. But it seems like the angel in the last chapter just went through not just the Mara, but he hints at the second coming of Jesus. And then he also describes this 2300 day period that seems to include both covenants, but it's hidden by the 2300 days. And we're not sure why, because it's so vague. But here it describes that in verse 11, it describes that desolation that makes desolate. And then it describes if you last beyond that, you're blessed. What does that mean? Is that a reference to the wise? Is that a reference to the two witness ministry, that if you last beyond that, you will see incredible things? I'm not really sure.
And it's only 3 months. Well, no, it's a month and a half, 45 days, right?
It's 45 days, and I don't think that anyone can say with certainty if it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
Or it's talking years, months, days.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows, and there's all kinds of answers. But I think the suggestion in a vague way seems to be the pathway is through this abomination that'll desolate my sanctuary in both covenants. But beyond that, there seems to be something of substance that's going to be wonderful. But as for you, Daniel, you're just going to die, and you'll stand with the people at the judgment or whatever.
That you'll get your inheritance. But you know what I find interesting is that in the King James Version, they say the daily from the time that the abomination that maketh desolation set up, there shall be 1,200. Then in 12 it said, blessed is he that waiteth and cometh. 1,305 and 35. Okay.
1355.
Where did I see
3.5 years.
the other? I thought I saw more. I guess I
That's
was.
like, isn't that 3.5 years? Doesn't that equate to about 3.5 years?
I have to do the math. What's 30 times?
Calculator. Here we go. 365
1335 divided by
3 equals. Well, 365 times 3 is 1,095.
What's 3.5?
365 divided by 2 equals 182 plus 1095, 1277 and a half. So it's close, Deb. 1290 would be 3.5 years. About what's 1335 divided by 365? 3.6575. It's pi. No, just kidding.
I think too, part of the calendar they may have used was another, like a 360-day calendar back in the time.
Okay.
See if you divide those two numbers by 360.
By 360, so 1290 divided by 360 equals 3.58.
Okay.
1335 divided by 360 equals 3.708.
That's what I got. 3.7, about 3.7 years.
Well, let me ask you, maybe there's a correlation. And I didn't look at this. Maybe there's a correlation because when Jesus was killed, he didn't go to the Father right away. There was this 40-day gap.
That's true.
Maybe there's a correlation here between that period of time and Jesus's like going to the Father, like going away for good. I have no idea, but I know God's walks in patterns all throughout the Bible. Maybe that's a pattern. I don't know.
Yeah, it very well can be or might be.
Well, I mean, it says that he went around showing himself to people, right? That's
Yeah.
where Jesus spent his time. You know, because hundreds and hundreds of people saw him on earth after he
Right.
rose from the dead. So I wonder if that's, you know, part of what's going to happen.
And that would
He's-
correspond to maybe the two witness ministry, that when they're revived and it scares the earth dwellers to death. Scares them. when that
Yeah.
happens. I don't know.
It's kind of scary.
But that brings us to the end. Boy, that was a long journey through Daniel, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. What do you want to, what should we do next?
I don't know. I think you're gonna teach, aren't you?
I think we should go through Revelation, through the 7 churches.
Okay,
No, let's see.
that's fine. Like starting at 1.
Yeah. I mean, you could start with Revelation 1, but go through the 7 churches. The letters to the churches.
Sounds good.
I like it.
Yeah. How is, are you involved with Maria and her study at all?
I don't know. I don't know if she started it or if she was just about to start it or they were starting it in the fall.
Okay, I was just
I haven't
curious.
talked to her.
I was just curious as to what, if she had, looked at this and what her thoughts would have been, but she didn't start it.
Daniel?
Yeah,
I don't know. I can find out. I'll probably call her tomorrow. So I'll see if she's done it yet.
okay. I just was, so we'll start in Revelation and we'll just see where it goes. It's like jumping into the ocean.
Yeah, but I mean, look, if we can look at the 7 churches, I've always found them to be like at the heart of the way God judges his people. I mean, that right there shows you the average churchgoer. Those
Yeah.
people that, that's who they are. And there's only 2 churches that he says nothing negative about.
True.
The other 5, he's very critical.
I know Philadelphia being one. What's the other one that he doesn't?
It's not Sardis, is it? I don't remember.
No, Sardis, he says you're dead.
Sardis, he says you're dead.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not bad.
Laodicea is dead. Thyatira.
I guess we'll find out.
It's not Laodicea. They got some nasty words.
There is another one. I always thought there was one, but I think you're right.
Smyrna. No, it's not Smyrna. Yeah, it is. It's Smyrna.
It
It's
is?
Smyrna.
Hold on.
He just tells them, you're going to suffer. Don't worry. Just stay faithful. I'd be like, wait, what?
Smyrna, was God pleased? Let's see.
Yes. He tells them they're gonna suffer. They're gonna be cast into prison.
Yeah.
Faithful unto death, and I will give the crown of life.
Right. So he doesn't say, I have this against you, like he says to everyone else. Like Pergamum, Thyatira, Laodicea, Sardis. I mean, some of them, like the one that you quoted tonight, he wants to spit out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Laodicea, isn't it?
You think you're great and rich? Who's that sound like? That prosperity?
Yeah.
Movement right there.
They the worst church. They won't even stand up for Jesus if it hurts their cash flow. That's what this says. I just Googled it. That's all.
Oh, I did one time. I did a study with my high school class at Crossroads on the 7 churches, and I looked up these churches. There's actually ruins of some of these cities, but it just talked about where the churches were located. But anyway, it was pretty interesting. I don't remember what I taught back then. It was a long time ago. It's like 15 years ago, but I always found this, the 7 churches to be, what he thinks of the modern day church. Well, probably what he thought back then and throughout history, what he thinks of our churches today.
What was, what is, and what's to come is all the same though, right?
Yep.
So,
Can't we just
All
skip
right.
over the suffering part?
Yes, I would like that. I'll take an order of that and a side of fries to go with it. It's like, no, I would love to be able to just be like refined without having to go through fire. Like, can I just be some of that gold ore that you mine and it's perfectly gold without having to go through fire to burn off impurity?
Daniel does describe a lot of, he does make mention of a lot of, like a portion, like when he describes, I was just looking at chapter 1 here in Revelation, and how Jesus is dressed. In one of my other Bible studies, we were wondering, I wonder why, because if you look in Acts, Paul goes to so many other locations. A lot of these, well, it's interesting because one of the guys from the church of, or the king of the south in Daniel, his wife was Laodice or Laodicea, and that was her name, and she's named after, Laodicea is named after her. And another interesting thing is Antioch, where Paul's from, is named after Antiochus.
Yeah,
Wow.
So it's
Yeah.
just, there's a lot of like interesting history, but why were those 7 chosen versus anybody else is another man, or another matter. I have no idea.
why these 7 churches?
Why these 7 versus all the other locations Paul went to in Acts? Why were these 7 chosen, I wonder?
I mean, I think they're prototypes of people.
Agreed.
Yeah, I know, and prototypes of what his church morphs into and how he would desire them to be.
So sad, right?
Mhm.
So sad.
I have such a hard time going to church, I have to tell you. I go to church and I go, I used to say to mom, maybe I didn't say it to mom because mom would have been upset if I said it to her. But I used to say,